right, and of course, very appropriately for this video, I have my alcohol-free drink here. All right, this year I have experimented with something that I thought was going to be really hard, and that is going alcohol-free. Now, don't get excited. This is not going to be the story of like a really heavy drinker who was an alcoholic and went to rock bottom and is now just finally free from addiction forever. My starting point is really like not having more than a few drinks per week, but it is still a pretty big deal for me. As I'm filming this right now, it is almost the end of July. And I would say February of this year was when I kind of started down the journey of going alcohol-free. Had a couple of drinks in April at an event, which I will get to later. But then after that, haven't had anything since. So yeah, this video is basically going to be the story of where I started, why I decided to try this, how it has gone, and where I think I am going from here. Why I'm doing this. Okay, let's rewind all the way back to when I was an undergrad, freshman year. This must have been about 2005. And already at that point, I knew I was not very interested in taking substances. During high school, I had had a couple of drinks, but really not that many. And I went into undergrad just thinking like, hey, I want to study, I want to do a good job, I want to be a good student, I want to make some friends and just do it all clean. And at that time, I was already getting into fitness. I had lost a bunch of weight in high school, and I thought, hey, if I stay alcohol-free for the most part, it's only going to help me in that journey. And so I actually decided to live in a dorm called Beaumont, which was one of the only substance-free dorms on campus. And I'm like, hey, I'm off to a good start. Freshman year, I don't know if I had any drinks. And then I had a few throughout my sophomore, junior, senior years, but not that much compared to all the other students around me. I would say that where things actually started to change for me, surprisingly, was after college, not during college. I moved to Dallas, had my first job, and I remember right around the start, or right before the start of my new job, I went on a trip with some friends. It was a lot of fun. But even on this trip, there were a few nights where I was like, okay, I want to just go substance free. I don't want to drink. I don't want to do anything. And I wanted to do this despite the fact that my group of friends around me was drinking. So one of the turning points that really surprised me was there was this one night, I was out to dinner with these friends. They were all drinking. I was not. And one of my friends made a comment that like, hey, Josh, the fact that you are not drinking and the rest of us are drinking, it just makes me feel really uncomfortable. Really uncomfortable to be around someone who is not drinking when I'm drinking. Now, this was a new idea for me at the time. I was like, this doesn't compute for me. Like, how could me not doing something affect you so much? And I think it came down to a little bit of a mix of them like not thinking I was being fun enough, or maybe them thinking that I was judging them for drinking if I was not drinking, or just that it made them feel bad about their own drinking if I was there. And from there, that really cemented in my mind the idea that I really need to drink at least a little bit to have fun and fit in. And then on average after that, whenever I was out with friends or at a work event or something like that, I would always have at least a couple of drinks. And so I think you could say I probably became, somewhat like a normal, average, moderate drinker. But even then, there were many times over those years, and now it's been probably 10 or 15 years since that one moment, there were still times where I considered quitting completely, mostly because of the health reasons. I just kind of saw drinking alcohol as just extra calories that wasn't really helping me with my fitness goals. And you have not only the calories from the alcohol, but when you're drinking a lot, you lose your inhibitions, you probably eat a lot of other junk food. But these reasons were never enough for me to quit. You might ask, why did I keep drinking even if I didn't really want to? Well, there was, being socially accepted, for the reasons I just went through. But also after I started drinking for a while, I think I started to become dependent on it to actually feel good in social situations. Like at that point especially, I was kind of a shy person and a little bit socially anxious. And I thought like, hey, if I take some alcohol, it'll loosen me up. It'll make me feel more comfortable, more talkative. And it started to become a little bit of a crutch, if I'm being honest. Okay, so fast forward many, many years to this year. What changed? What finally made me kind of try this? Well, there were really two things. So the first is that at the beginning of the year, I went through a breakup, which was, of course, really hard to go through at the time. And at the same time, I had the self-awareness to realize that, hey, I'm going through a hard time. If I start drinking or start drinking more or start relying on alcohol to get through this time, that could be a slippery slope to becoming just more dependent on alcohol in general. I had seen this happen and heard this happen with other people in my life, and I just really didn't want to go down that route. And so when that happened, I said, hey, at least for the next few weeks until I feel better, I'm just going to cut out drinking completely just to not risk this at all. So I'm going along, kind of recovering from this breakup, and then another thing happened. I was listening to a podcast, and I heard a book recommendation for this book called This Naked Mind. It's a very good book. And in this book, this author, she talks about how our culture is so infused with drinking, some of the reasons for why people drink, why it's so hard to quit. And basically, after reading this book and the fact that I was already not drinking at the time, and then I started coming across like other books and articles and videos, I just started getting exposed to a few ideas that made me just question the whole thing. Question, should I even go back to drinking in the first place? And I started just coming up with a list in my mind of reasons why maybe I shouldn't go back. Okay, so let me go through some of those reasons. Fitness and productivity. Okay, so first, get the obvious out of the way. The first thing I'll talk about is the benefits to your fitness and productivity if you go alcohol-free. You don't have to worry about all those calories. You don't have to worry about hangovers, which then impact how you feel the next day, which impacts your ability to work out, to do other stuff in your life that you might want to do. You don't have to worry about the impacts to your sleep. None of these were strong enough reasons before to make me want to quit, but still very important. Negative health impacts of alcohol. Okay, this is one that I think should have been obvious for me, but really wasn't. Now, of course, I knew that if you drink alcohol in excess, that is not that great for you, that you risk harming your liver, that you risk a whole bunch of other stuff. But then, there's all those studies that get published in the media that say, actually a small or moderate amount of alcohol is actually good for you, that it's healthy for your heart. So this really all led me to believe that alcohol is just really not that bad for you, and maybe it's actually even good for you in moderation. But, as part of this whole journey, I started looking into this more, and it really turns out that, at least according to the latest science, alcohol in really any amount is probably not good for you and might be really bad for you. All those studies that say that alcohol might be good for you, like if you kind of look into it, there's lots of doubts around how these studies were designed and whether you can really draw those conclusions from those studies. And meanwhile, there's this other kind of wealth and body of science that goes through just all of the different things that alcohol does to you that negatively impact you, including the fact of actually raising your chances of getting certain cancers. And there's some science that shows that actually even a very small amount of alcohol raises your risk for these cancers, at least somewhat. Now, this was news to me. I didn't even know that alcohol was really a carcinogen, but apparently it is. And I think the really insidious thing about alcohol is that it can be a slippery slope. Most of my life, I've had it under my control. There was never any point where I thought, hey, I'm drinking too much. But at the end of the day, alcohol is an addictive substance. And I think most alcoholics start out under control until at some point they're not. And you could really say what's going to make the difference between someone who stays under control their entire life versus someone who doesn't. It seems like what I've noticed with people in my life is that the tendency is to drink more and more over your life and not less. And so yes, low and moderate amounts of alcohol might not be that bad for you, though, again, some of the science is showing that maybe it actually is. But the fact that it's a little bit of a slippery slope and addictive substance just gives me a little pause. Does alcohol really help me loosen up, have fun, and fit in? So as I mentioned, this was one of the major reasons that I was quitting, the idea that alcohol just inherently makes things more fun, that you need it to fit in, that any event without alcohol is just going to be not as fun as it could be. This is an assumption that I had that I never even questioned, and I think it's an assumption that a lot of people have. But through this whole process, this was the first time I really started to question it. So here is a different way to think about it. Think about the last time that you had fun. Why is it that you had fun in that situation? Was it really the alcohol, or were there other things about the event or the environment or the people that you were with that was making the event fun? And if it was both the alcohol and all the stuff that you think made something fun, how much of it was one versus the other? So for me, what I realized, and the more I started to think about this, and the more I started to go through some events, alcohol-free, which I'll get to in a little bit, I started to realize that the vast majority of why I had fun in certain instances is all of these other things. It's either I'm with people that I like, or I'm doing something interesting, or I'm seeing a movie that I like, or having some new and exciting experience. And yes, alcohol was also a factor in those situations, but what was it actually doing for me in those times? Was it really making the event more fun? I came to the conclusion that I don't think it really was. I think what it was actually doing is, frankly, dulling some of the emotions and thoughts in my mind that might prevent me from having fun in a certain situation. Which is a big difference from actually being the source of the fun. Like, one of the things that I've thought about a lot in my life is, what are people going to think about me? Will they think I'm weird? Will they think I'm fun? Am I saying the right thing? Do they think I'm stupid? So I think what alcohol does for me in most situations is that it just kind of dulls down those thoughts. It just takes those thoughts out of my mind, because it takes like all the thoughts out of your mind. It dulls your mind, it dulls your physical motor skills, it dulls everything. So it dulls those thoughts too, and when those thoughts leave my mind, I'm able to have more fun. So it's like, yes, alcohol could be a way to deal with those feelings, but then are there other ways to deal with those feelings that are healthier and more long-lasting? Because when I really think about it, I'm not even sure that alcohol really helps with these feelings, at least in the long run. Like, after years and years of drinking alcohol, I would still sometimes feel this way in certain situations. So at best, it was a Band-Aid solution. But even worse, I started to remember times where maybe I went into a social situation and I was already like down or stressed out or upset about something. And then I take a few drinks and maybe it helps for like 20 minutes. But then after that, all of those thoughts and feelings are still in me. And maybe it's even compounded because now I'm not feeling physically as well. I'm hungover the next day. Sometimes at the end of the day, it just made those feelings worse. So at the end of the day, it's like, it's not really the source of fun. It's sometimes like a Band-Aid solution to have fun in certain situations, but not even a Band-Aid that even works particularly well. And so it's like, okay, should I just find another way? So what this all led me to was really just asking myself the question, does alcohol give me any lasting benefit? The downsides around health and like my fitness goals and all of that are very clear, but the upsides, is it really enough to justify me continuing to drink when I look closely? If you ask me right now, I would say probably not. Yes, when I drink, it sometimes feels like a relief in the moment, but I think for all the wrong reasons and not in a way that is really lasting. And yes, it is the socially acceptable thing to do and might help me fit in better. But at the end of the day, I don't really know if that's a good reason. And when I think about the few people I know in my life who don't drink or have really cut down on their drinking, I actually personally respect them a lot. So at the end of the day, I think this is a little anticlimactic, but I just felt less interested in drinking than I used to feel. I thought it was going to be this big, painful effort to go alcohol-free. And there were some difficult pieces, which I'll get to in a little bit. But at the end of the day, I just don't think I even want to do it as much as I used to. I feel like I've seen through the matrix a little bit, and now I can't unsee it. And I just feel different about it than I used to feel. So first, the positives of this change, a lot of them are what you would expect, but let me go through them. Health benefits. Okay, to get it out of the way again, the obvious one, there's all the health benefits that I already knew about. It's been easier to maintain my fitness, easier to get better sleep, easier to just feel good throughout the day. All of those have been true. Realizing that I can still have fun. Now, I already started to talk about this a little bit earlier, but really once I started going alcohol-free and started going to events and doing other things in my life that I normally would have drunk alcohol at, I really started to prove to myself that actually, I think I can have fun in most of these situations, even if I'm not drinking. And so first I was nervous about this, but then I started to do all these things like company trainings, weddings, parties. I went to the Kentucky Derby. All of them I went alcohol-free, and all of them I still pretty much had fun. It was actually interesting. I was at the Kentucky Derby and kind of walking around the infield and just walking past a bunch of random drunk people. And I remember one girl kind of yelling out in a drunken fashion, "We need alcohol to survive." And that was a moment where I was like, do you really? I don't know. But this just kind of really cemented in me the idea that it's really the environment and the people and what I'm doing that makes me have fun and not the drinking. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, since February, there was this one event in April where I did decide to do a couple of drinks. It was like the scavenger hunt for my sports league that I attend. And I wanted to try this again just to see like, hey, am I actually missing anything? Am I making a mistake by doing this? And it's like, yes, I had a couple of drinks. Like, yes, I had fun, but I don't think the drinking was really necessary, and I really didn't feel that great about myself after either. And so I decided like, hey, at least for the moment, I don't think I really need to drink anymore. Feeling better about myself overall. Third, and maybe the most important and most surprising benefit, is that I just feel overall better about myself and I have higher self-esteem because I am no longer kind of doing this thing that is sort of harmful to me in many ways just to manage my emotions. I just feel better and kind of more in the driver's seat of my life. And it's also just led me down this whole other path of finding other ways to manage my emotions and anxieties, something I can go into in another video. Okay, so in short, there have been a lot of upsides to this, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it has like changed my life forever or fixed all my problems or that there were no downsides, but it has been a noticeable positive effect that I've been really happy with. Negatives of the change. Okay, like anything in life, there were some negatives, some downsides to this change. None of these have so far been enough to make me want to go back to drinking, at least at the moment, but let me go through them. Yes, some events did get more boring. Now, this might seem to contradict what I said earlier, but I'm not going to lie, some events did just get more boring. But I would say I think about this now in a different way from what I used to think. Now, I just think that some events are just plain boring. Either the people are boring, or it's an event that I'm just not interested in, or we're not doing anything interesting. And so yes, I guess there are a few solutions to this, and one solution is just to drink alcohol, which, as I mentioned before, dulls down all of your emotions and all your motor skills. And so yes, it does dull down that feeling that something is boring. It's like, that's one option. Or I can do something to make the thing that I'm doing not boring, like I can change the subject in the conversation, or change who I'm talking to, or change what we're doing. Or, frankly, if I'm at some event or something that is just a complete lost cause where I'm just like, kill me now, I can't stand this anymore, I can just leave. At the end of the day, I have better things to do in my life than just stay at things that I don't enjoy just for the sake of doing that. Other people's reactions. Okay, so finally, now this is the biggest negative, or the biggest thing that I've been afraid of and thinking about, so let me go through this. I would say the most common kind of reaction that I've gotten has been just a general kind of surprise or disbelief. It's just, alcohol is such a common thing in our society that anyone who is not drinking just really stands out. And it's people don't even really know why would anyone even consider not drinking? It is so interesting because sometimes I didn't even have to mention that I was kind of taking a hiatus from drinking. All I would have to do is be the only one at the table at a dinner, let's say, who did not order a drink. And sometimes that was enough for people to just notice and ask about it. So there's that reaction. A lot of times what also happened was, I would actually maybe mention that I wasn't drinking for XYZ reasons. And people would feel compelled to, volunteer why they like to drink and why they continue to drink. Even if I didn't ask, which usually I didn't. And it could be that people were just trying to make conversation and, didn't really know what else to say. But sometimes I also got the vibe or, had the worry in my mind that okay, maybe they think that since I'm not drinking, I'm judging them for drinking. And so therefore they need to kind of explain why they're drinking and defend themselves a little bit. Okay, so that was another kind of set of reactions. And then, the third bucket I would say is people who just really kind of doubted that this was a thing that, I could do or that I even should do. I told one friend I was kind of thinking about making this change long term. And what he basically told me was that he thought it would be really hard to do because there are just some social situations where it is not acceptable if you are not drinking. And I heard this from more than one person. Others kind of told me the same thing that my friend, 10 or 15 years told me that, hey, if I am with someone and I am not drinking and they are drinking, it makes them feel uncomfortable that I'm not drinking. And then, some people also asked me how I would handle this in my dating life. When would I tell someone that I wasn't drinking? Would I tell them when I'm first chatting with them, when I have my first date with them, when I'm a few dates in? Kind of this is some deep, dark secret that I need to be really careful. When do I tell someone this thing about me? Kind of I'm a gambler, or I have a lot of debt, or I have HIV or something like that. Only it's interesting in this case because I'd basically be telling them that I don't do something that a lot of people consider harmful or dangerous. This should be a good thing. And it's really interesting that I could be the weird one and the one that is ostracized, all for not drinking. Now, I think what a lot of this comes down to is people just communicating to me their fears or discomfort around all of this. Some of these fears may be things I should really consider, but it's hard for me to know how much of this is also just the fears that other people are projecting onto me that wouldn't necessarily happen in my case. But, I also, think to myself, there's a small voice in the back of my head that says, if I do this forever, will this impact my relationships and friendships? Will I not be invited to as many things because people don't want to have a non-drinker there? It doesn't seem like this has happened yet. It's been 6 months, depending on how you count it, since I really started going down this path. And you might say, if I do lose any friends from this, then they weren't real friends to begin with. And, that's all true, but it's still a hard pill to swallow, that could happen. And, I'll be honest, this whole thing around what other people think, this has definitely been the biggest thing that has held me back, not only from potentially making this a permanent change, but also from even making this video in the first place. What I would say is that, for the moment, I haven't let these opinions and fears really influence what I do, and that's kind of what I intend to do at least in the near term. You know, in my mind, these just aren't really good enough reasons to not be living life on my own terms, but it's something else I'll be thinking about. Okay, and by the way, I think I should say, if you are one of the people and you're watching this and you've expressed any of these things that I just went through to me, don't worry, it's totally okay. I actually appreciate hearing all of these things. It helps me just think through all the different sides of this. Some other interesting observations. Okay, so this isn't really a positive or a negative, but one thing that I notice way more now than I used to notice is just how ingrained alcohol is into American culture. First, there is the completely pervasive assumption that you need alcohol to have fun and that there are social events where you just have to drink alcohol. You know, I remember talking to another friend who, he doesn't actually like to drink, is what he's told me. But he feels like there are some events where he just has to drink, whether it's parties or weddings or whatnot. And in those events, he does drink. And before, of course, I would have felt the same way. But now I would say I have started to question, are there really instances where you really have to drink? And secondly, there's just all the fanfare and obsession around alcohol. It's seen as the adult thing to do. You see it glamorized in advertisements and movies and television shows. There's all this thing around wine culture and distillery tours. And, you know, these are all things that people enjoy. And, you know, I still frankly enjoy some of these things sometimes too, even if I'm not drinking. Like, I went on a distillery tour earlier this year, which I thought was a lot of fun, even though I didn't drink anything on the tour. So I'm noticing all of these things and I don't really know what to do with it, but I would just say that now that I'm not drinking in the moment, it just makes these things like way more apparent than they used to be. Where I'm going from here. Okay, so now what? You know, will I ever drink again? Am I done drinking for good? And my answer to that is, I don't really know. You know, what I've been telling people when they ask me that is that, like, yes, you know, if I am ever in a situation where I really want to drink, I will at least consider it. But the thing is, at least the last few months, I haven't really been in any situations where I actually wanted to drink. And, you know, if that's how I continue to feel, then maybe this is permanent. So, you know, we'll see. I don't think I have this all figured out. I'm still thinking about and exploring this and talking with people about it and just seeing how I feel in different situations. So because of that, I am not really sure what's going to happen in the future. Anyways, hopefully that was helpful or interesting for some of you. As always, if you like this video, hit the like button, which will help others find it, and subscribe for more. Peace.